Noon Eastern at the Department of Justice, where Attorney General Bill Barr is inside as we speak this Saturday, reading the Mueller report. An administration official telling Fox News that Barr could reveal the principal conclusions of the report as early as tonight.
We have got Fox News team coverage fanned out across Washington this afternoon. We've got Peter Doocy over on Capitol Hill getting lawmakers' reactions, and David Spunt is in front of the Justice Department.
And with that, welcome to America's News headquarters from Washington, continuing coverage of the Mueller report. I'm Leland Vittert.
Great to be with you, Leland.
And you as well.
And I'm Jillian Turner. Let's check in first with David Spunt live from the Justice Department. David, what can you tell us about what's happening inside right now?
Hey, Jillian, good afternoon from the Justice Department. A busy Saturday here. We do know that Attorney General William Barr is behind me right now, behind the walls of the Justice Department, reading that Mueller report. Now, we have some video of him leaving his home just about an hour and a half ago on his way here to the Justice Department. He arrived here late this morning. We're told that he's looking at that report right now and will decide what and if he's going to release later this afternoon. We are hearing from sources to Fox News. It's possible that could come at some point today, possibly even as early as between 3 and 5 p.m. Now, from what we understand, Barr and his team and a handful of people, a small handful of people, are the ones that have eyes on this report. Now, it is not being circulated around the entire department, definitely not by email, and for good reason. DOJ officials want to make sure that there isn't any classified information before just releasing it to the masses. Now, Special Counsel Mueller has been deliberate since he took over this investigation almost 2 years ago to keep this from leaking to the public. Many would say he's done a great job because we still don't know exactly what's in the report. We do know, though, that Attorney General Barr got a hold of this report late yesterday afternoon. He and his team taking a look at it, looking at it very closely. Now, there is always a catch that we won't see as much as people want to see right away, because there's a possibility that there will be some of this that's classified information, or there are some national security issues. Meanwhile, a senior DOJ official told Fox News yesterday, and this is very important, Leland and Jillian, that there will be no more indictments in this case. In fact, Barr said he may be in a position to brief Congress as soon as possible. But the key point here, Jillian, is that we don't know, number one, what's in the report, and number two, we know that this is not being circulated widely to all different justice employees here. This is going to be seen by a small group of people, possibly later by members of Congress who certainly want it, and we're told that could come sometime late this afternoon. Jillian.
Oh, to be a fly on the wall of Attorney General Bill Barr's office this morning. David, we will check back in with you later in the show. Thanks for that.
Well, that lack of information about what's in the report that David pointed out certainly hasn't stopped members of Congress from offering political, helpfully, conclusions to what may or may not be in the report. Peter Doocy ahead of a conference call by Democratic leaders about next steps there at the Capitol. Hi, Peter.
Leland, Democratic lawmakers are about to host a conference call for members and staff about Mueller messaging, which so far has just been filled with public promises to investigate the investigators and figure out why the special counsel didn't want to indict anyone else. So Democratic lawmakers are saying they want the full unredacted report. They want all the evidence in the interviews used to compile it. And if they don't get it, they're going to subpoena Robert Mueller and haul him before a congressional committee to testify.
If it is not made public in its entirety, we will we'll use a compulsory process. We'll subpoena the report, and if necessary, we reserve the right to call Mueller before the committee, or maybe even Barr before the committee.
Democrats don't want the president's legal team to see the report before they do, but I'm told that some of the president's legal advisors believe they've got a right to review it, since they never claimed executive privilege, but may have still shared with the special counsel some privileged information they don't want getting out there. However, the Mueller report is summarized or disseminated, Republicans want to make sure that there are at least a few pages on what they are basically characterizing as Trump critics' sour grapes.
I think there were some people over there that wanted this outcome, that wanted a bad outcome, and didn't get it. Who's going to be held accountable? How many tens of millions of taxpayer dollars were spent meandering around on what many have called a witch hunt? I think that ought to be part of the report.
A few weeks ago here on Capitol Hill, when the president's budget was finally ready, we watched, and it was a big spectacle, as White House staffers brought huge stacks of paper on carts and on hand carts over to deliver them to members of Congress. That's not how the Mueller report is going to be delivered at first. At first, it might just be a very short summary. Any kind of full details with things fully fleshed out seems like it's a ways away. Leland.
All right, Peter Doocy on Capitol Hill. His reaction continues there. Peter, we'll check back in. Thanks so much.
Joining us now with the Democrats' reaction to all of this is Michigan Congressman Dan Kildee. Congressman, thank you for joining us today. I want to start with the top line item out of this, which is, so far, no new indictments. Somewhat of a victory for the Trump team, right?
Well, obviously, that's something that they should be happy about, but I think we all should withhold judgment until we actually get a chance to read the report. I mean, it's fairly clear that the Justice Department takes the position that the president can't be indicted, and I'm not suggesting that he otherwise would have been. But I don't think that we should let the standard be whether or not people are indicted when we draw conclusions from the report. And one other thing that I think it's really important for me to say, and I'm a Democrat, but I don't think anybody should be wishing for bad news for anyone. We shouldn't want to see collusion. We shouldn't want to see evidence of significant problems within the administration. We all should be wishing for the administration to do well. But we do have a responsibility to look at the facts, make a clear-eyed judgment about what those facts say. And frankly, the picture that's been painted so far is troubling, but I'm still going to withhold final judgment until I get a chance to actually read this report.
Congressman, I have watched a lot, but not all of the coverage since about 5 p.m. yesterday when this news broke. And you were the first Democrat. Well, I just look tired. I had to talk to you earlier today, too. But anyway, you are the first Democrat that I have heard who has gotten out and said just what you said, is that no one should be looking for bad news in this, and that the contrapositive of that is that it is good news for the country that you don't have any members of the president's inner circle indicted for having a conspiracy with Russian agents, as so many have alleged was going to happen. Why do you think that's so hard for your fellow Democrats to say?
Well, I think there's a big difference between whether or not people are indicted or whether we should make clear-eyed judgments about the veracity of this president and the fact that so many people close to him have been indicted, in at least one case convicted. That's not good for the country. But we shouldn't be searching or hoping for it to get worse. I think the importance of the Mueller report is to give us information so that the Congress and, most importantly, the American people have a complete view as to how this president has operated and make their own judgments and not get ahead of ourselves by wishing or hoping for one outcome or another. I'm one who believes the facts will speak for themselves. I don't think this reflects positively on the president, don't get me wrong, but I don't think we should be cheering for an outcome that has our administration or the U.S. government in constitutional crisis. There are still some answers that we're going to ask for, though.
I want to get your reaction. We're running up against a hard out here, but I want to get your reaction to President Trump. This is what he said last night en route to Florida. Take a listen.
We're going to see what happens. It's going to be very interesting, but we'll see what happens. There was no collusion. There was no obstruction. Everybody knows it. It's all a big hoax. I call it the witch hunt. It's all a big hoax. So we'll see what happens. I know that the Attorney General, highly respected, ultimately will make a decision.
Somewhat measured, right?
Somewhat measured, but I think it's important to note that just because there has been no indictment doesn't mean there's no collusion, doesn't mean that there was no obstruction in the typical sense of the term. So, I think the president's still going to have a lot of questions to answer.
Right, Congressman Dan Kildee, thank you for your time today. We appreciate it a lot, and we will check back in with you soon.
Good to see you, sir. All right, noteworthy that soundbite from President Trump was mid-afternoon, so before the report was transmitted, before this news of no more indictments. Since then, we have not heard from the president, not even a tweet. So, what is next for the White House now that the Russia investigation, at least this part of the Mueller investigation, has ended?
To weigh in, we're going to bring in former GOP Congressman out of Georgia, Jack Kingston. Sir, thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
What's your response to President Trump's new sort of statement here that, you know, the Attorney General and Robert Mueller are highly respected. He trusts that they're going to come out with, you know, on the right side of history here. What's with the new attitude?
Well, you know what? This is a great day, and I think that the White House is absolutely celebrating, but they're doing it in a way to let the report do the messaging for them. The report is saying after 675 days, there have been 0 indictments related to collusion. There have been indictments, but they were not related to collusion. And then all the talk that we've heard in Washington about, well, the president is going to obstruct this investigation. He's going to fire Robert Mueller. All that kind of stuff. It never happened. And so the president doesn't have to tweet today. Now, we all know and love the president probably will be tweeting at some point about this. But for now, I think they should just enjoy their victory lap quietly. And it is a huge deal. I can tell you that the Democrats are extremely disappointed. Dan Kildee is very measured. He's a moderate. He's a good man, but he's not the majority of the Democrat passion right now. That party is more controlled by the Adam Schiffs and the Jerry Nadlers. And what they're going to do is they're going to take some portion of this report, and they're going to get some information from the Southern District of New York, and they're going to take it and run with it and make a big deal about it.
But sir, this is an important point to what you were saying earlier. The president and his team, we hear, were celebrating down at Mar-a-Lago yesterday. Some pictures floating around of them at dinner in good spirits, understandably so. One former DOJ official saying on a scale of 1 to 10, I would be a 9 if I was President Trump's attorney in terms of how excited they were. But at the same time, you point out that Congressman Kildee has offered a measured response. Republicans, in what we're hearing from you, also isn't that measured. The fact that there are no more indictments does not mean there was never an effort by the Trump campaign to work with the Russians or to be involved with the Russians and to get their help. We don't know because we haven't read the report.
Leland, I think if there was, it would have taken hundreds, well, not hundreds, but it would have making tens of people, say 30 or 40 people would have been involved in it, and Robert Mueller would have picked them off. He picked off as many people as he could, and he squeezed them as hard as possible to get some evidence of collusion, and there just wasn't there wasn't anything there to find. So I think we would have known it, and it would not have abruptly stopped with no collusion. And keep in mind, it didn't stop with no collusion.
Sir, it didn't stop with what you just said, no collusion. It stopped with no indictments of the president's inner circle and no indictments for criminal conspiracy with the Russians. It didn't stop with no collusion.
And the president has not been exonerated from other potential wrongdoing. That's what potentially Democrats are hoping is going to be in the report.
Let me ask it this way. Do you worry that you're taking a victory lap too early and getting a little bit in front of your skis in terms of what this report may or may not say when nobody knows what's in it?
Well, I don't, because with all the leaking that had been going on, I think we would have known it. With all the people, the George Papadopouloses and the other crowds, you know, the smaller players, we would have known something about it. It would have been leaked out, they would have been indicted, and there would have been real discussion about collusion. So I just don't, I think there is reason for a victory lap. It doesn't mean that Donald Trump is now going to have a great love from the nation, from the Democrats, from his critics, but it does mean that he's in really good shape right now as respects the Mueller report. This is all we've heard from the Democrat Party for 2 years. It's all we've heard from so many of his liberal media critics, is that Robert Mueller was going to bring him down, and the group of investigators were tough, and they would get to the bottom of this. And how many times did we hear from his critics that they have seen the report and that they knew that there was evidence of collusion, and yet where are they today?
Well, Senator Blumenthal even went beyond what you just said, talking about that he thinks there's going to be a lot of criminality in the report, again speculating about something that we have not seen yet. Congressman, appreciate your thoughts and your time, sir. It was nice to have you with us.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thanks, Leland, Julian.
All right, continuing coverage throughout the day for the latest on the Mueller report. Ed Henry at 9 p.m. Eastern, picking up the baton for live coverage. Tomorrow, Fox News Sunday, Chris Wallace will talk to the chairman and ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. These are the people who will get the first indications from the Attorney General about what is in the report. Chris Wallace joining us in about 45 minutes for a preview of that interview. Check your local listings for time and channel tomorrow. Howard Kurtz will look at the media's coverage of the Mueller report tomorrow 11 a.m. Eastern.
Coming up, the Midwest dealing with more rainfall this weekend, adding to the already widespread flooding across several states. We'll talk to Nebraska's Governor Pete Ricketts. Plus, U.S.-backed forces announced today that ISIS no longer controls any ground inside Syria. We'll take a closer look at what comes next after the caliphate has collapsed and why ISIS terror threats are still far from over. We'll also take a look back at all the Robert Mueller indictments over the last several months as we await the Attorney General's release to Congress of the Mueller report's principal conclusions. Stick with us.
Welcome back. The Attorney General spending his Saturday reading the Mueller report, and as we await the first details of what's actually in it, Republicans celebrate the news of no new indictments. Democrats point to the more than dozen people, some close to the president, charged by the Department of Justice. Lauren Blanchard with us, where things stand for those currently in trouble.
Well, Leland, so the Attorney General is at the DOJ reading this report. The almost 2-year-long investigation did end yesterday without any new criminal charges, and a senior DOJ source tells Fox Mueller is not recommending any further indictments. That has to be a sigh of relief for some of the president's son, Donald Trump Jr., and son-in-law, Jared Kushner. There had been speculation of some wrongdoing, which some thought could end up in a final round of charges.
What the country was led to understand is there's a serious question: was there collusion between the Trump campaign and Russian interests? And so now we have at least no indictments, right? We'll see where was there information and the like. But there's one really key thing that it seems to me people should feel very good about. They should. Whether they will or not is their business.
Over the span of the investigation, there have been 37 indictments. None have been for collusion. 34 people have been charged, and more than 24 Russians were indicted on charges related to election interference. Members of the president's 2016 campaign were involved in the special counsel's investigation. 5 former aides have pleaded guilty and agreed to cooperate with Mueller's team. And we are still waiting for Roger Stone's trial later this year. Now, here's the thing. While the Mueller investigation has ended without any public charges of collusion or obstruction, we're not sure yet of the special counsel's principal conclusions, something the Attorney General may release later today. Of course, Democrats and many Republicans are calling for the full release of the report, but Leland, we just won't know until the Attorney General finishes reading that report and decides what to do.
We'll certainly know where the House stands on this in terms of what their vote was last week. Lauren Blanchard, thanks so much.
For more insight, let's bring in our legal expert panel now. Former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney Robert Bianchi and political analyst and attorney Gail Trotter. Thanks to both of you for your time and for the expertise you're going to provide us, the free legal expertise you're providing us with this afternoon. Gail, I want to go to you first. Read the tea leaves for me when it comes to no new indictments. From a legal perspective, what does it really mean?
Right. Well, after 2 years of hysterics and hyperventilating, legal observers see that the Robert Mueller report is going to land with a big thud. And there's 2 directions that this can go in. It can either go back to the standards and legal norms that we have had up until this point about how these investigations should work.
When you say it lands with a thud, are you saying the report necessarily exonerates President Trump?
No, but the fact that our sources say that there are not going to be any indictments coming out of this, it shows that the predicate for the investigation, which was treasonous collusion by the Trump campaign with the Russians to rig the election, that there are no indictments. There have been no indictments issued on this. There have been no guilty pleas on Russian collusion, and now we know that it's very unlikely because of these DOJ sources that there are going to be any forthcoming indictments. So we could go back to
why even bother with the report?
Because under the law, the Attorney General has to report to Congress the high-level conclusions of why Robert Mueller and his team decided not to prosecute anyone or go further. The grand jury testimony needs to be kept private. That should not, under law, be shared with Congress or with the public. And we can go in the direction of going back to the legal norms where if someone is not prosecuted, then the federal government does not use the investigation to smear.
Gail, you've sort of taken the same tack that the Republicans have, that this is the victory lap and the exoneration of this.
Not exoneration. No, I would not say that.
Okay. But it begs the question, Bob, that what is in the report, the narrative part of the report that could come out, has potential landmines for the administration in terms of what various people's desires were or intentions were, especially as it relates to the Trump Tower meeting with the Russian cutout. It also begs the question, there may not be any indictments by Mueller's team. We don't know about any referred investigations or other wrongdoing that was found by Mueller and then referred out to other parts of DOJ.
Leland, I just say ditto to what you said. That's very true. And let's go back to history a little bit about somebody named Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton was investigated, and James Comey gave that ill-fated press conference, and everybody went apoplectic about that because they said technically it looked like she may have committed crimes. But what this is the DOJ just doesn't file charges on possibility, speculation. They want to make sure, especially with a high-level target, that they have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So while it's a victory, that Trump Tower meeting on June 9/16 was always a problem for Jared Kushner, for Trump Jr., and for the president himself, as well as the corollary obstruction. But that report very well could say they either were wittingly or unwittingly involved in trying to undermine the election in an improper way. But just like the Clinton investigation, prosecutors use their discretion, like I used to all the time, to say, it's probably a crime, it could be a crime, there's probable cause, but I don't know if I can prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt.
If we look at the nuts and bolts here, guys, the other important, I don't want us to miss this, the other important finding so far is that there were no conflicts between Mueller's team and Barr's team. Bob, tell us about that quickly.
Well, I think that there's some enheartening pieces about that there seems to be that this investigation was allowed to go unimpeded. The fact that Rosenstein was allowed to stay on it and Mueller was allowed to stay on it. But as Leland pointed out before, a lot of referrals and sealed indictments are out there right now because I think that Mueller, at least this is what I would have done, in order to protect my position, would have farmed as much out as I could so that this way, if I get removed from office, those sealed indictments are there and those other investigations in other, like the Southern District of New York, are there as well. So we need to be careful about the idea that just because you're not indicted or you're not charged doesn't mean that that report's not going to say there was wrongdoing.
All right, we are out of time. We've got to leave it there. Gail Trotter, Bob Bianchi, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Great to be with you both.
Leland.
And a Fox News Alert live pictures in New York where a pro-Trump rally has broken out outside of Trump Tower. The president himself is spending the weekend in Mar-a-Lago right now, and his supporters are out in force, it appears, celebrating in the streets of New York City.
Still ahead as the Mueller investigation ends, we've got the latest on what we know so far about the special counsel's report. And as floodwaters devastate the Midwest, we'll speak to the governor of Nebraska about the road to recovery.
The flooding is just devastating. We've hit record crests. We are going to continue to work on the recovery as well as the response and keeping people safe.
And a Fox News alert to the heartland of America. Massive flooding in the Midwest, 2 deaths, and more than $1 billion worth of damage in Nebraska alone. President Trump approving the state's emergency declaration this week, shortly after Vice President Pence surveyed flooded damage alongside Nebraska Governor Pete Ricketts. Governor Ricketts joins us by phone as he travels his state that is still in many parts underwater. Good to talk to you, sir. Status report. You say you got people still in shelters, but boy, it seems like it's going to be a long way to recovery. Is the water fully crested yet?
Yeah, the water is cresting and it's starting to go down, but we're still having a lot of flooding all along the major river systems across our state. I'm actually inspecting some of the flood damage in Fremont, Nebraska right now, where the Platte River basically went back to its old riverbed from dating back to the 1940s. So it flooded out several housing communities and then broke through levees and came into the city of Fremont. And actually, the city of Fremont was isolated starting about Friday, and then really civilian traffic wasn't able to start moving till Wednesday. We were able to get some convoys of food and fuel in on Sunday night, but Fremont was fairly isolated.
Governor, I hear the emotion and the fatigue in your voice. What is this going to mean? How wiped out are some of these communities in terms of agriculture and in terms of businesses that flooded as well? Yeah, we've got the submission we made to the federal government had about $800 million in cow-calf losses, about $840 million in crop losses, $85 million to homes and businesses, about 341 businesses, over 2,000 homes. And, of course, that number is going to grow because that was just our initial assessment. This is going to be a long road to recovery, but we're Nebraska strong here. We're going to get groups together, and we actually had a fundraiser yesterday to get the process of recovery started. There are few communities stronger than the farming communities and the rural communities of the Midwest heartland states in America. Spent a lot of time there and know them well as we're looking at satellite images to show how far the rivers have expanded. One Senator Ben Sasse posting a picture and saying that you could see water for as far as the eye could see. How much of this interacts with the difficulty that farmers have been having in Nebraska as it relates to tariffs, as it relates to some of the economic issues that farmers are having? Are we talking about bankruptcies? Are we talking about people losing their family farms yet? Well, I think it's too early about that. And, of course, there are going to be aid programs from, for example, USDA has got a livestock indemnity program for the folks who've lost livestock. There's a conservation program for farmers whose land's been damaged. So there are some things that we're going to be able to do there, but no doubt this is definitely going to be a difficult situation, even more difficult for our farmers and ranchers. Yeah, for sure. Governor Ricketts, we appreciate it. God bless, and to you and to the men and women who are on the front lines now trying to help folks. It's a dangerous time out there, and we appreciate you taking a minute to join us, sir. Great. Well, thanks very much for having me on, and we appreciate all the help. All right, we'll talk to you in better times. Thank you, sir. All right, thanks. Bye-bye.
President Trump's in Florida this weekend. He's visiting Mar-a-Lago amid all the speculation surrounding the contents of Mueller's report. Garrett Tenney is there. He joins us live from West Palm Beach with the latest. Garrett, how is the president feeling today?
Well, Jillian, as you know, the special counsel's investigation has been one of President Trump's favorite targets, but it has been radio silence from him in the 19 hours since this report was delivered. No tweets, no comments on camera, and he reportedly did not mention it at a fundraiser dinner that he attended last night. However, his outside legal team tells us that he is glad this investigation is finally over, and they are cautiously optimistic about what the report says. His attorney, Rudy Giuliani, told Fox News, "This marks the end of the Russia investigation. We await a disclosure of the facts. We are confident that there is no finding of collusion by the president, and this underscores what the president has been saying from the beginning, that he did nothing wrong." Now, as the Attorney General goes through the Mueller report, it is possible that the White House could request to see it before it goes to Congress to determine if there is any material that might be subject to executive privilege. It's not clear when or if that will happen, but last night, Press Secretary Sarah Sanders tweeted, "The next steps are up to Attorney General Barr, and we look forward to the process taking its course." The White House has not received or been briefed on the special counsel's report. Now, Democratic leaders are keeping a close eye on this as well and argue that the White House should not be allowed to interfere in decisions about what parts of the Mueller report are eventually made public. And at this point, the White House officials are suggesting they likely will not be commenting further on the report until additional details come out, and that could come as soon as tonight. Jillian?
A fairly measured response so far from the president, from the press secretary. It's a really interesting weekend to see the tone. Thanks so much, Garrett. We'll check back in with you later.
You got it.
And we will continue to monitor the president's Twitter account as well. He's out at his golf course this Saturday. No news on who he's playing with. Meantime,
that's all Leland really wants to know.
Well, I'm wondering if they need a fourth. We bring in former FBI Assistant Director Mark Morgan. Mark, good to see you as always.
Thank you.
For almost all of us, except those who lived through Whitewater or lived through Watergate, the idea of a special counsel, independent counsel's report is the Starr report, which was lurid in many ways. and also exhaustive in many ways. So when everyone thinks about a report, that's what they envision the Mueller report being once it gets through Barr's reading in Congress. Is that what we're going to see?
No, and Leland, I think you're hitting on a great pillar that's not being discussed enough. The special counsel statute is completely different from the independent counsel, and there's a distinctive difference. Remember, they let that independent counsel statute lapse for a reason because of what you just said, that the Starr report was salacious and it really had information in there that didn't need to be, and it really damaged people's lives. The special counsel statute is purposefully, it's limiting. If you just look at what they require Mueller to give, they call it a confidential report. So if you just take a look at that, they're sending a signal that should be just that. It's confidential. It should not be an open report, every single word.
Confidential being an actual classification category, right, Mark?
Correct.
Not confidential in the sense that, we would throw the term around.
Correct. That's right. It's a classification level. And it goes even a little bit further. So from a law enforcement perspective, again, I don't care about politics. That's not my lane. But from a law enforcement perspective I'm definitely worried about sources and methods. I'm definitely worried about 6E grand jury material that he's prohibited from releasing. And then there's a really true balance between the public interest and then the legitimacy privacy rights of people who are not indicted, who are not charged. We saw what Jim Comey did in 2016. Right? He broke every ethos of an investigator by going out, talking about investigation, and at the end going, oh, but we're not going to indict.
Now, you mean, when you talk about Jim Comey in 2016, you mean sort of naming and shaming Hillary Clinton, but then not bringing any charges against her, right?
Exactly. It goes against.
Why is that dangerous?
Well, so it's dangerous because if you think about one of our kind of founding principles of our judicial process is, so in this case, Hillary and anybody, she didn't have the right to cross-examine. She didn't have the right to present her defense and her case. And instead, she was tried, along with these people, could be tried in an open public court, a public and political open court. And it's just not right.
Drill down here a little bit on something. A name that was tossed around a lot was Jerome Corsi, who was involved in the Roger Stone world. He was offered a plea deal by Mueller. He very publicly turned it down. He said, I think I'm going to get indicted. Turns out, as we now know, no new indictments coming. What does that say, that they offer a plea deal to somebody that now turns out not to have been indicted? Conceivably, you don't offer a plea deal to somebody unless you know you can prove a crime beyond a reasonable doubt.
No, not necessarily. You could think that you believe that a crime has been committed, and you're going to go and you're going to work with that individual to see if they'll go ahead and confess. But sometimes they don't confess or they don't agree to the plea deal, but you still don't have enough evidence and information beyond a reasonable doubt, and sometimes it's not prosecuted.
Having worked for Bob Mueller for 12 years, I think you said.
Right.
If you read the tea leaves, right, what do you think is in the report? Do you think we already know the sum total of the information pertaining to the investigation? Do you think and what do you think the release is going to look like? Redacted, unredacted, portions, all of it? What's your best guess?
So, no, I think you guys have summarized it well a few times here, is we don't know what's in the report, right? Yeah, but this is what I can tell you.
We thought, maybe you were going to tell us.
I don't have any insight. But what I can tell you, I worked for Bob Mueller his entire 12 years as director. And what I'm very confident to say is that when he completed his report, it is just that. It's complete. There's no stone that's left unturned. And so what he says, I recommend no indictments. The investigation is done. It's complete. And so now we're talking about...
Real quick, we got to run in a second, but yes or no, there could be follow-on investigations that he referred things out to other parts of DOJ.
Absolutely. Okay. So that's right. So we're talking about the narrow collusion. I would add obstruction in that. I think for the most part, he's saying loud and clear that there was not enough evidence to pursue. We
got to run before the computer cuts us off. Thanks, Mark.
Mark, thank you.
You bet.
Coming up, ISIS loses its final stronghold in eastern Syria, and we will speak to a top U.S. Mideast envoy on the next steps as President Trump prepares to pull more troops out of the country. U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces announcing this week the capture of the ISIS group's last remaining territory in eastern Syria. So will this have any impact on the U.S. involvement in that country? Joining us now, former U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Martin Indyk. He's also a distinguished fellow and director of executive education at the Council on Foreign Relations. Ambassador, thanks so much for being with us today. Is the ISIS caliphate now dead?
It's over. The caliphate's over, but ISIS is not. I think we should all celebrate the fact that its last holdout, wasn't exactly a stronghold, is gone now in Syria, as it was all rolled up in Iraq before that. But the problem with ISIS is that it has metastasized. It's in various places around the world, and there are places where it's lying in wait to attack again. So just because it doesn't control territory doesn't mean the threat has disappeared, but it's certainly an important milestone in the battle to destroy them.
So an important milestone in terms of their physical presence on the ground inside Iraq and Syria, but what about the cyber caliphate, as many analysts calling it? Their incredible reach that persists up until today online, on social media. Tell me about the threat from that.
Well, that is a problem, and there's no question. Problem of recruiting by ISIS through social media it has been a phenomenon that has been a real challenge. But when they don't have control over territory, it's a little more difficult to organize attacks. It has to be done in a much more clandestine way, and over the decades now that we've been fighting terrorism, techniques have been developed for dealing with that, and indeed using social media is also leaving a fingerprint that enables it to be followed.
I think the key there is their recruitment capability remains alive and well. Right. Mr. Ambassador, you know this as well as I do, but there is daylight between the U.S. and some of our European allies on this so far in the last 24 hours since, the administration announced the caliphate is dead. The French foreign minister, the English foreign minister have all released statements saying, you know what, we're not declaring victory yet. We're going to continue to fight ISIS as if they are up to strength and we're not backing down. How do you rectify that daylight between them?
Well, I don't think it's that important compared to other daylight between the United States and Europe on fundamental defense issues. I think both sides are right. This is a victory. The United States has led the campaign against ISIS, but there have been over 40 countries involved, and we shouldn't ignore the fact that the fighting on the ground has been backed by the United States, but carried out by Syrians, essentially, particularly Syrian Kurds. But the Europeans, particularly the French and the British, have been our allies.
Ambassador Indyk, we're up against a hard break here. Thanks so much for your time today.
General Bill Barr is at the DOJ this Saturday and reading the Mueller report, deciding what he will release to Congress. We bring in Tony Katz, heard on the radio in Indianapolis and across the Midwest. Good to see you, my friend. Republicans have sure changed their tune on Bob Mueller, haven't they?
Well, not as much as Democrats have changed their tune on Bob Mueller. Let's be clear about that. I love my team until I love another team. But the one thing that we can say is the release of the report. We don't know what's in it, right? I agree with that. But the release of the report on a Friday night after 5 p.m. during the NCAA tournament is bad optics for the Democrats.
Hey, what's worse optics? The fact that that's when it was given to the Attorney General, or the fact that there's no indictments coming out of it, and now you've got Democrats going, oh, well, we don't really care whether there are indictments, but we need to read the report, and then we're going to investigate the investigators.
Right. So understand that getting an indictment was actually never the goal, right? They would have been happy to have one, thrilled to have one, and said, oh, look, we were right all along. The objective of the Democratic Party with President Trump is to charge him with a crime. The crime itself is insignificant. It's the charge that matters. They want to be able to say, under investigation right through 2020. It is exactly what they want. It's the playbook that they've been playing for the last 2 years, and they're going to continue for the next 2 years. When the Democrats got elected to control the House, it started the night of 1,000 subpoenas, and it's still going on.
The question then comes, does this backfire at some point on Democrats with the storyline you've just laid out, does it backfire on Republicans at some point who are claiming victory before having read the report as well?
Well, I don't know if they're claiming victory, but I would say that if you're
come on, Steve Scalise and everybody else is out there going, this proves no collusion.
No indictment of President Trump. No indictment of President Trump. No indictment of Donald Trump Jr. No indictment, no indictment, no indictment. You can't do anything else. The president should start saying no indictment every time he goes out.
That doesn't prove no.
But the point is that you would have seen something if Robert Mueller had indicted somebody, that would have been the story. So of course they have something to cheer here. And the question is, does it backfire? Does it hurt anybody? I think the president gets to engage a little bit of vindication in the idea of witch hunt. And I think that plays well in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Indiana, the same states that won him the presidency.
We will continue watching the president's Twitter account. Chris Wallace's thoughts coming up. Meantime, Tony Katz from Indianapolis. Good to see you, my friend. Shabbat Shalom.